In this video, we will show you how to replace your front lower control arm on this Honda Accord. This is part of your front suspension, located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friends, let's get started on our job. The first thing we need to do is safely raise and support the vehicle so the wheels are off the ground. Now once you have your wheel up off the ground, we're going to continue on to removing the wheel. To do that, you'll find that you have 4 19mm lug nuts and remove the hubcap at the same time. Now that we have the wheel out of the way, we have a clear view of the front suspension. Let's start removing the front sway bar link. You'll find that you have a 12mm head on the mounting bolt that makes its way all the way up through this area to the top. On the top, you also have a 12mm mounting nut. If your sway bar link bushings look like this, you need to go ahead and replace your sway bar link. Start taking this apart here. Get our bushings, washers, spacer. A quick inspection and we'll set this aside. With the sway bar link out of there, the next thing you need to do is clean and inspect the area that it was mounted to. You can see the sway bar here. We'll use a small piece of sandpaper. I have seen small cracks on sway bars before. You do want to pay close attention to that. With the sway bar link out of the way, let's move a little outward towards this through bolt. You'll find that you have a 17mm bolt that comes through from the front all the way towards the rear, and it has a 17mm mounting nut. Let's go ahead and remove that bolt. Hold the bolt head with a wrench and go ahead and remove the nut. Now that we have that out of there, we'll just make sure we give it a close inspection, and we'll start it back on through, but we do not need to remount anything. Just get it aligned and slide it in. The next thing we need to do is apply upward pressure on the suspension. We want to be careful not to cause any damage to the backing plate or the brake rotor, so we'll come right over to the caliper and gently start applying a little bit of pressure upward. After that, we can continue to that lower ball joint mounting hardware. To remove the lower ball joint mounting nut, typically you're going to find that you have a locking cotter pin. Use some cutters to remove it. A quick inspection, you can set that aside for recycling. You do want to replace this. Use a 17mm to remove the mounting nut. We'll start this back on, just a couple threads here. The next thing we need to do is cause some vibration in this area. The vibration will help break the ball joint stud free from the lower control arm. Now we can release pressure from the suspension to remove that mounting nut. At this point, you should not need any support under this area. Now let's have a look down in this area. If you were to look, you're going to find that you have 2 17mm headed mounting bolts that you're going to have to remove. We can easily gain access to this one. Once we have that out of there, we'll have to lift up on the suspension, pivot the axle out of the way so we can gain access to that rearward mounting bolt. Carefully take hold of this. We'll lift the ball joint up and out of the lower control arm. Slide this forward and remove that rearward mounting bolt. We can see the other one now. Let's follow the lower control arm to where it connects to the subframe. You'll find that you have a 17mm headed mounting bolt that comes through from the front towards the rear. On the backside here, you have a welded nut. It's held in place. If you can't gain access to the head of your mounting bolt, safely start raising your steering knuckle up just enough that you can remove that bolt. Take hold of the control arm, slide it out of place of the subframe. With that out of there, we'll continue on to our center mounting bolt and remove the control arm. There it is, friend. Let's prepare to install our brand new lower control arm. We'll start in the center at that subframe. Take your mounting bolt, start it right through there, and start it in by hand. Now we'll pause there and continue raising up the control arm, bringing it through this portion on the lower strut. Just bring this up until it's aligned. Start the mounting bolt through there as well. Before you can continue tightening either of these bolts and torquing them to manufacturer's specifications, it's important to make sure you have the lower control arm in original ride height position. So with that said, unless you have a second jack that you can put under here, we're going to safely lift up on this and slide the support underneath that control arm. Start raising this up. While doing so, be extremely careful not to cause any damage to your ball joint or ball joint boot. Once you do have it in the original ride height position, continue on snugging these mounting bolts and then torque them to 47 foot-pounds. Put the mounting nut on there. While holding pressure under this area, we can also connect this bar. What you may find is that you're either going to have to move the control arm forward or rearward to get this to align. You may also have to raise or lower it as necessary. Now looking at this, I can tell that I do have to bring my control arm forward. If you have a hard time taking hold of it and giving it a tug forward or rearward, you could use a ratchet strap of some sort. Along the rearward aspect of that control arm, you have the area for the sway bar link. That's a handy area to go to. Start getting this aligned. Starting our mounting bolt here. You always want to make sure you start these in by hand so you're sure you are not cross-threading them into the wrong position. All right, so I've got that bottomed out. I'm just going to back it off just a couple of threads here. We should have a little bit of movement from that. We can continue on with the rearward mounting bolt. Same process, start it in by hand. At this point, you may have to maneuver the knuckle forward so you can gain access. Now that we have this in this position, we can continue on with removing the strap, assuming you're using it, and remove the support from underneath your control arm. Let's get our next mounting bolt in there. Start that in by hand, of course. Now that we have that one started in, we can continue on by snugging up each of these mounting bolts. Now it's time to put the ball joint stud in the lower control arm. You're going to have to lift up a little bit. Carefully slide it in. Start on your ball joint mounting nut, snug it up, torque that to 32 foot-pounds. The next thing you need to do is pay attention to the slots of the mounting nut in comparison to the hole that goes through the ball joint. They need to align. If the slots don't align with the hole, continue tightening until the very next slot does, and then put in your locking cotter pin. And a brand new cotter pin. Slide that through, pin it over. We'll continue on by sliding this into place. Take one of your bushings, bring that down towards that control arm. Install a washer and then a spacer. Once you have the spacer on there, we'll be using another washer, another bushing, but this time the bushing will be facing up towards the sway bar. If you find you can't fit it in between this area, you can gently try prying up on the sway bar. Use a pry bar in between the sway bar and the lower control arm. If you find you have a hard time fitting the sway bar link in between the control arm and the sway bar, you can carefully try lifting up on the sway bar. We'll use a pry bar for this. Now it's time for the upper mounting bushing here. We'll have that facing down towards the sway bar. Install your washer and your locking nut. Now that we have everything together, we'll center the sway bar link so each of the bushings is in the proper placement. We'll snug it up and then we can torque this to 14 foot-pounds. There we are. A quick confirmation that everything looks as it should. One last quick inspection in this area and we'll continue on with installing the wheel with that hubcap. When installing your hubcap, you want to pay attention to the port for your valve stem. Align it, slide it in place, and then you can start on all 4 of your lug nuts. At this point, we'll bottom them out, get the wheels safely back down on the ground, and we can torque these to 80 foot-pounds. With the wheel back on the ground, let's torque these to 80 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Okay friend, we've got our vehicle back together. At this point, you want to take it for a road test, listen for funny noises, and get yourself safely down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.